Welcome to the Gigless Podcast, Season 2, a podcast showcasing the works and talents of those who lost their gigs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This podcast will feature a range of creatives from the tri-state area who are young visionaries and who contribute to their craft despite the recent events that have happened. Joining us today is our host, Remi Leibovic, speaks with May Vutrapong Vatana from Rooftop Conversations, a human interest story for the modern world. Based in Brooklyn, New York, May's extroverted and vibrant personality light up the stage as she brings in friends from her profession and daily life to her viewers. As a New York State attorney, she started this series to start engaging in conversations and create an audio-visual experience within quarantine. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Season 2 of Gigless. I'm your host, Remi Leibovic, and today our guest is May Vutrapong Vatana. She is a New York City-based content creator and also the host of the Rooftop Conversations podcast and Instagram content reel videos.
It's more of like a YouTube thing now.
Yeah, it
Just
started
like
on Instagram. It started back when we had Instagram TV and Instagram wasn't trying to become TikTok. So this season, we'll be focusing on creative people during COVID-19 pandemic's post-quarantine. We are currently in the stages of reopening, but that doesn't mean that everyone has their gigs again. So I invited May on the show to talk about, she is a New York City-based attorney, but she has explored her creative side and is actually like a great content creator, both on her personal Instagram and on her professional Rooftop Conversations one. So, May, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much, Remi, for having me on your platform on Gigless. Your work has been really amazing, and it's been a pleasure to have come on your show. So a little bit about myself. My name is May. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and I think like Remi says, I actually just got recently admitted to the New York State Bar as an attorney. But of course, because of COVID, I'm currently unemployed at the moment. However, I did take this time to kind of explore my creative side. I think for a lot of us who were typically in office jobs or typically in what you would call left brain job, uh, professions, you don't really get the chance to explore your creative side as much because of schooling and because of your professional work. So definitely during this time, during the pandemic, it was a great way for me to kind of explore that side and to, of course, create something like Rooftop Conversations. And Rooftop Conversations is basically, I'm going to just say, like, as my friends joke around, an audio visual experience, but it's really just a show on YouTube that I've created where I interview different guests from different parts of my life, actually, like friends, people I've met on Instagram, people I've met at events like Remi, and just kind of getting to know them, their passions, their work, and what they like, any interesting topics or like it's like human interest stories in a way for the modern world.
Yeah, I've been on Rooftop Conversations and it was just so much fun to film in my backyard and be on my dock. So, yeah, and then hearing all of her interesting friends, because she has a lot of interesting friends. She has like friends that are like from programmers to scientists to creative people to just all walks of life. It's just so interesting to hear everyone's stories. And May is just an awesome storyteller.
Thank you so much, Remy. I really appreciate that. Like sometimes, honestly, I think it's just from me being an extrovert, and that's where the project came about. It's so in the beginning of quarantine, I worked out on my rooftop because New York City, right? You don't have a big backyard to exercise or a big living space. So I was just like, I miss talking to people. I miss like seeing people. I miss having that interaction with people. And as an extrovert, that's where you feed up a lot of your energy. So I'm like, all right, let's just do this. And I've always wanted to do something in content creation. Even when I was still working in my office, and I was like, well, what do I do, right? Like, where do I go from this? I see people on BuzzFeed do it. I've seen, people go from there, and then I was like, I don't have a camera, I don't have a fancy like equipment, I don't have like a funny storyline. But this was a good way, seeing what like John Krasinski did with Some Good News or what Miley Cyrus did with Bright Minded on IGTV. I was like, okay, maybe this is something I could do, but with like everyday people. My guests aren't everyday. I think they do like super amazing things that are like awesome people, but just people that like you can see yourselves in doing something. And of course, these folks are also mostly BIPOC, people of color. And yeah, and I think just kind of showcasing folks like, hey, like maybe there's someone who wants to be an engineer and like you can see someone who looks like yourself on the show. You may see another lawyer who might not be represented in what mainstream media says, but there's someone out there that I've interviewed for someone to look at. So yeah.
Right. I think that, and this is something that Dane, my producer of Gigless, has also done with me, is that when you don't have the platform or the space, just make your own. We're at the point in technology where if anybody has access to a phone, they can record things. If anybody has access to a laptop, they can edit things. And we all have friends, as much as I'd like to think. So if you can't edit it, one of your buddies can edit it. And I think that that is just so incredible. But you are a one woman show, right? You run the whole thing yourself.
I am. I literally am the producer, the editor, the marketer, every single thing. I think I take on every role. Yeah.
I think that you're doing a great job of it, you know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate it.
This work is between me and Dane. Dane does all the audio editing. I do the whole graphics and everything and putting together the videos for YouTube, but Dane is the audio master for sure.
Yeah, and I think like honestly, like you were saying, right, going back to accessibility of like being a content creator. I think like before, and I'm gonna credit one of my guests and also like one of my closest friends that I interviewed for um my own show, Rooftop Conversations. My friend Matt, he's also a film editor, and he was like, you know what, lately these days, like technology has made it much easier for everyone to just kind of create content, right? Like back in the day in the 90s when we were born, it's you would have to get like these really high tech equipment, but now you can all you do is if you have a phone, you have a laptop, you can be creative, right? Like literally all I work, I still have the iPhone 7 Plus because I'm broke, so I'm like literally running off like an iPhone from like 5 6 years ago, a tripod, and then invested in some earbuds, and I created my own show and just like marketing tools. You use something like Canva.com to market your things, social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, using all that, utilizing all that. And of course, like asking your friends for guests, right? You can find content everywhere. People make vlogs and about their daily life. People eat for YouTube. People make cooking shows. And for me, it's like, I have a great resource of all these amazing friends who do like amazing things and talents. And I'm like, well, might as well get them to be on. And people enjoy it. People love talking about themselves and their passions and giving them that platform. So it kind of just all worked out. And I think that's one of the greatest things about content creation now. It's so accessible and anyone can do it and anyone can have a voice and in the art content world at least.
Yeah, it's just about curating content, and people don't understand that curating content takes so long and staging because you have to stage things, you have to make sure that the lighting is correct. It's like a whole, you're a photographer, you're a set designer, it's a whole thing. So you're so coordinated though, like with your outfits and everything on your Instagram.
Well, thank
And
you
your
so much.
dog.
Yeah. Oh, my dog. Yeah, that's my girl. I want to interview her for Rooftop Conversations one day, but I
Oh
don't
my
know if she's
God,
gonna
do
give
it.
much content. But yeah, no, you're right. I think back to with curating, right? I think even things like how I pick the guests on my show. I mean, kind of intentionally, but also not intentionally, I tend to focus on folks of color, but then also most of my friends are also folks of color. So that's where the unintentionality comes, but also picking to see, like, okay, if I have a lawyer, what type of lawyer are they? What kind of story are they going to tell? Right. Because I know tons of lawyers and I don't want to just bring every other lawyer that I know on the show. I have to kind of make sure, like, okay, what do they have to say that's a little more unique, right? So this past season, I've had person, a black law student who wants to be in prosecution, which is totally two different ideas when you come to like criminal, and like she's also interested in criminal justice, right? So when you think prosecution, criminal justice, those two don't really intersect sometimes, and just kind of asking her like, okay, so what do you think? Why do you think being a prosecutor will allow you to focus on criminal justice work better? And so that unique story to tell, or having someone who is an immigration attorney, but then asking her about her personal experience being a first gen college student and being a first gen law student, and also being a daughter of immigrants as well. So it's like focus, like finding curating stories isn't just okay, picking off any of my friends and being like, all right, you come on. But it's like, okay, which person has a unique story to tell? Because if I put like five lawyers on there, they're telling me the same thing. That's also not productive at the show too. So curation and like the questions you have to make up and like ask folks, it's all part of being intentional with what you're doing.
Right. So I don't know, have you adapted to a new way of working? Has your work, shifted from
Yeah,
this whole pandemic?
definitely. I mean, so prior to the pandemic, I found it really difficult for me to like. So I worked so prior to the pandemic, I was in a fellowship that wasn't necessarily of my legal interest or my professional interest, but I just did it because money and I needed something to do post grad. And during that time, I was like feeling kind of like down about like life and just like, oh, this feels like so unfulfilling. And looked into ways of like, okay, what can I do to explore other passions that I have? And I talked to my friend about creating a podcast. I mean, like, I tried it out, it just didn't work. And I think like what really got to me about this time was like it was for the first time allowing me to stay at home allows me to be able to do things on my own time, right? So like even when I was working and I was like working from home, I didn't have to go out there and like venture out, create sketches and content and like do all that stuff. It allows me to be able to schedule things on my own time, do things that I like what I want, like do things on the time that I want to. And also like people are at home, so it was easy for me to get guests as opposed to scheduling this person who was like on a route or this person commuting or this person going to this thing. Since everyone was at home, it was just more easier for me to get guests on board. And another thing I think is just like staying at home and this like new, quarantine mindset. I think it just allows people to be more brave and more creative. It's like, okay, well, we're in this pandemic. There's a new way of life. What can we do? And it just gave me the courage to kind of pursue content creation, right? Like, forget about what people are judging you. Like, my former coworker Veronica, and I'm like credits to her because she really pushed me to do this. She said, when you're being a creator of any type, visual art, filmmaking, podcasting, the thing is just to do it. And I think
Yeah,
quarantine forced me to kind of be like, all right, just do it and just take that risk. And I did. And it's funny because like there's been like episode 17 is about to be released this Saturday, and I have more to come. So I'm surprised I even made it this far because I thought it was gonna be 5 episodes and I would give up. No, I'm like literally about to be on like episode 20 something by the time like maybe this thing is like released. So it's like super cool.
absolutely. Yeah, no, Dana and I have some episodes in the bank, but yeah, it's just so great to see how far that you've come in, it's August now. We started this whole project in March, and to see how like interested people are and that you've built a following in such a short amount of time. And that's another thing that I want to just, make a point about is that the the content that people are following has shifted because now with social distancing and all these things in effect, like you can't go to, just for example, like all those pop-up sculpture places that are really expensive in New York City. You can't go there and take pictures for content anymore. You can't um I feel like a lot of people on Instagram are having like existential crises because they feel that uh they can't take pictures at a restaurant anymore. They have to completely shift their content from, to make, I guess, it's not always going out and spending money. Like there's other ways to make good content. And you and I are definitely examples of that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I agree. I think COVID-19 has shifted a lot of our mentality and mindset. In the beginning of COVID, people were criticizing influencers for how they're spending their money, how they're able to like yield their influence to getting like a COVID test before everyone else did. And I think people
Hmm.
are now looking for like genuine, like down to earth, like content, right? Like things that they can relate to, but also things that have a meaning. And I think that's what I've been trying to do with rooftops as well. I've sometimes like, filming on a rooftop and like in the middle of Brooklyn, you sometimes like stuff happens, right? Like my tripod will fly away or things like that. And I keep some of that stuff in because it shows like, hey, I'm just human. And even to the way I dress,
Hmm.
you mentioned my personal Instagram. I like definitely make sure like I like look a certain way on in, like my personal Instagram. I dress up, but I intentionally wear actually gym clothes and like put my hair in a pie pony and everything because I'm like, well, what's the point of me? Like, I want to be able to show people and send a message. Like, you don't need to be glamorous all the time to be a content creator. You don't need to be aesthetically, put together or attractive or conventionally attractive to do this. You can just be anyone with a message, and if your message is meaningful and it connects to people, there you go. And that's something I'm trying to break, especially as like women content creators too. Like,
Yeah.
people always expecting you to look a certain way, but I'm trying to break that stigma. Like, you don't need to be a certain look in order to be a
Yeah.
content creator to be successful at it.
Yeah, because I feel like as a woman, just speaking as a woman, that you're never going to win either way, because
You're never gonna
before
win.
this whole thing, if you were overly dressed, they're like, well, where are you going dressed like that? And now if you're overly dressed, it's like, what's open that you're going to?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know so it's just like, you know what, do your own thing and enjoy yourself your own way. But I think that one of the things that content creators, especially lifestyle bloggers, are encountering is that there is a stigma now with, you know, going out to eat. There's a stigma now with um going out to eat, or going or being in big groups of people and not wearing masks, and just promoting the idea that like uh COVID's like, over, because it's not away yet. It's not gone
Yeah.
away yet.
hmm Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's not gone. And I think that's what it is, right? I think like you were saying, like you were what were you saying? Okay, you were saying something like, um, I think like lifestyle content creators, right? I think if I think for me it's just like the like once again, right, policing folks online. Like what do you want to put on? What do you want to do? What you want like I mean, and that I think like I don't want to. I'm not policing the people who do choose to go eat out or choose to dress up or choose to go outside. I think that is on them. And if that is what allows them to feel great about themselves at that moment. And as long as they're being socially conscious and responsible in those trips, because you can go out to eat and still be mindful that COVID is a thing and
Oh,
you know
absolutely.
what I mean? I think as long as your choices don't hurt other people and it makes you feel good, then it's fine. I think going
Right.
back to what you're saying about content creation, right? It's like if you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a person of color, especially if you're a gender non-conforming person, right? People want to police your content. And it's like that's the thing about why people are afraid to get into content creation, right? Even for myself, right? Because I was like, oh, are people gonna like what I put out? Are people gonna care what I put out? Are people gonna make fun of me? And the thing about content creation is like vulnerability, but also like putting yourself out there, being vulnerable and like being, you know, vulnerable with like what you're saying, but also like being proud of your work and having fun with your work. And I think you tell me this too as a fellow like content creator. You're like, even if you're not getting paid, if you're not getting recognized, even if you just have 5 people watching your show or 20 people watching your show or like 3,000 people watching your show, you're still an artist if you're owning that work, if you have ownership of your content, and if you're like having fun doing it. I think genuinely, like, it sounds weird, but I enjoy doing rooftops as much as you're saying, like, oh my God, May, you run your own show, are you tired? Are you not? I'm like, yeah, I'm exhausted. There are times when like filming on a rooftop is not easy. It's really hot sometimes, and like you're like in the sun, sweating, and having to come edit, having to schedule everything, having to find people. It's hard, but I enjoy it, and I've actually like reconnected with either reconnected or connected for the first time on a deeper level, like people like yourself for the first time during quarantine. And I'm like, okay, I'm expanding my network further, and it's like now because of rooftops, I'm able to get to connect with so many more people on a deeper level. So,
We talk every day. For people
yeah.
that are listening, we talk on Instagram every day. We've bonded like that. And I'm just going to say this is that, you know, yeah, there always was judgment and policing on these social platforms, but I feel now it's just like so much more in depth. And going back to what you said earlier about, you're an influencer, you have like a million people following you, and you're promoting something that may or may not be safe. You don't know. And also, that's the thing is like I feel like a follower feels that they have access to you. So putting up those boundaries as a content creator, especially as a creative person, I don't care what anybody says, every creative person is sensitive, and they're just sensitive on a deeper level than I guess like average people, because of the fact that like musicians, performers, artists, content creators, any type of creative person is more in tune, I feel, with like, you know, the I guess the emotional reality of the society that they're living in. I feel that like I feel like artists and creatives just translate that and interpret that on such deeper levels than like average people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree because like I think as a content creator, although I'm probably like more like on the logical side because of like how my upbringing and how like my professional life, but also I do agree because um for me personally, like at least I'm like the way like the content I produce, right? You have to be intuitive with what like what you want to send out and what you want people to see about yourself and your work, but also how it makes the audience feel, right? So like a lot of the things I focused on my show, it's we focus things on like current events, right? I've spoken to people about the uprisings in the light of the in Minnesota with George Floyd. I've talked to folks about dealing with grief and COVID. I've talked to folks about, how it is to, organize during a time when there's a global pandemic, talking about local politics. So I have like taken, stuff that happens in the outside world or the non-creative world and kind of implemented that in my work and my art in a way. So I do agree there is like
Absolutely.
that like I think there's like an intuition in a way, right? And I think
Yeah.
by being vulnerable, people think like they have access to you, like, oh yeah, like I can just like do this and this and this. But it's like no, like we're also people too. We're also we also have our own opinions, our own mindsets, and the work that we're doing. Yes, it's up for you for conversation. It's up for debate. It's up for like communication about the piece, but it's also like the piece, not the person behind it. So yeah.
Right.
I know.
And so, to speak about your upbringing, have you been trying to, I guess, like reconnect with the things that you found joy in when you were younger? Like, like I guess the roots of your creativity.
Oh my god, so it's so okay. So it's interesting because like I don't think like I am a creative person, and if I was, like I think it was stunted just by the way like I grew up. Growing up in an Asian immigrant household, like careers or anything in the arts is like a no. Like that's like you can't like that's there's no point in doing that. And then of course like my own professional life, like having to go through law school, having to be in such like a stiff field, you don't get to see yourself, do that. But I think like it's allowed me to foster whatever creativity I had. You know what I mean? I like looking back, I always used to make videos for presentations in middle school. Like I found my old camcorder the other day. Even throughout law school, I loved to like fashion was a big part of my life. I like to dress up. I like to curate my Instagram, have an aesthetic on things. And I think quarantine has allowed me to embrace that side a little more, like a side that was like initially like that was never fostered, if that makes any sense, because of the way I was brought up or the way that I was raised or like the career that I'm in. So it's allowed me to foster that and to kind of get more in touch with that, right? So it's like, okay, what does it mean to be creative? What does it mean to do a certain thing? And I think like being creative or being a content creator, there's no one look, there's no one method, there's no one way to be an artist, there's no one way to be a content creator. As long as you're making something, you're doing something, and you're enjoying it, it makes you happy. That's like the way to go.
Right. And there's like tips and tricks to not spend a lot of money while doing it. Like everybody walked into like an AC Moore and found out that there's like a flower wall, and started like curating these crazy flowery pics, like outfits and everything. There's simple ways to do it, but I feel that a lot of people are intimidated about like specifically picturesque like Instagram content creation because of the fact that they see people spending so much money in order to do it. But like one of the most, uh, there's a person I know that is a fashion blogger, and they're just like, I get everything from the thrift shop. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, everything's from the thrift shop. I don't buy any of my stuff
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I think that's like the
new.
misconception about content creation, whether it's like fashion blogging, filmmaking, editing photos, taking pictures, um, podcasting. There, like I think one of the so I actually tuned into, and I think one of our inspirations, Locatora Radio's Mala Munoz. She held a podcasting session, a workshop on Instagram Live, and she's like, podcasting doesn't take a lot of money to do. What you can really do, if you need soundproof materials, you don't need to spend money on like the little foam things. Just get pillows and put them on your window to like block out any noise. If you need space, just go and if you have a closet, put yourself in the closet and record in the closet. Take your phone and just record, take your computer. It's things that like a lot of us have already like in our hands, you know what I mean? That we can do work with. I film on an iPhone 7, like literally an iPhone 7 Plus. Like it's not even like an X or an 11 Pro or whatever. It's an iPhone 7 Plus, and it gets the job done. And yeah, and it's people just have that misnomer that you have to do it perfect. And I think that's going back to what my coworker Veronica was saying. She's like, you don't need to be perfect when it comes to the arts. You don't need to be perfect when it comes to content creation. You just have to create. And that's the gist of it, right? And I think that's what her words actually kind of influenced me to just like, okay, just do it, just start creating.
Yeah. And another thing I want to just, when people are intimidated about followers, as someone who, went to a big university and someone who now works in social media, I will say that followers, it's been rounded off that it's only a penny a follower. And also, a lot of people didn't know that like they could make to keep their professional and personal, separate. So you might see someone having like X amount of followers and being like, oh, they're following them because their creation is so great. It's like, no, dude, like they probably went to school with them. They probably know all these people and just told everybody, follow me, follow me, follow me. And then just edited the account while it was going through. So you never really know. And also, do you want everyone to have access to your content, which is now why a lot of content creators are, especially in the age of COVID, a lot of creative people are going to OnlyFans just because, and making Patreons just because of the fact that, like, hey, like, OnlyFans, only exclusive people can see your content. People that subscribe to you can see your content.
Mhm.
And once you, even Patreon, if you give X amount of dollars a month, like you get exclusive content. And that can be if you're a musician, that could be if you're an artist, that can be if you're a dancer, it could be anything, but just building up that boundary.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important. And also, like, followers don't matter. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, if your work reaches one person and they genuinely were changed by it, or they genuinely really reflect on that work and were like, oh my God, this piece of work changed my life, it's so much better than like 2,000 people just liking your thing because it came up on your timeline. Like 2,000 people just liking, because sometimes people like just to like. People don't like because they really care about it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But like having, like, I don't have a great following on my Rooftop Conversations pages, but like I think getting to have people come to me and tell me like thank you for giving me this platform, or like thank you for giving me the ability to tell my story, or having folks, reconnecting with folks that I haven't spoken to in ages or ever. You know what I mean? Like from doing rooftops, I was able to connect with two women from growing up in the Thai community center I went to. And I never spoke to them when I was a kid because of, like Thai misogyny or like, some like that competitive value that we were brought up by our community. But now, like getting to know them, getting to know their story, they kind of like it allowed me to kind of be like, oh, like we face the same things within our community. We want to change it. We want to advocate to do better. And like it actually made us a lot more closer than we ever were as kids. So it's really interesting to see like people put so much, and it's capitalism, right? People put so much value on followers and monetizing your content, but they don't focus on like
Quality.
how does that quality, like how does that content make you feel? How does that content doing this work make you feel? Like are you happy? Are you like, it's like with every job, right? Like if you turn a job into a job, and you could do something you love, it's going to be a job. But if you do
Yeah.
something you love and you just really do it for the passion, it's never going to be a job.
Exactly. And I just want to say this as well is that a lot of people have been taking social media breaks. A lot of creative people have been taking social media breaks, and social media breaks are healthy. I read something the other day that you shouldn't go on your social media until you're at least 3 hours into your day. Because if you see something, especially with right now, everything that we're seeing, I'm not going to name things because I don't want to trigger anybody, but there are videos that are circulating that are awful. And I have a rule with myself that I don't explore Instagram or any social media platform past 7 o'clock because I will get angry. So, it's talking about being a sensitive person. I will get angry. So, like, for me to get like a good night's sleep, 7 o'clock is the cap. And I feel that like that's why the world needs more people like you, May, because you put out good content that is giving a platform to people, allowing people to story tell, and allowing people to, have something like listen to a positive story. Because shout out, I love Locatora Radio. Locatora Radio, I feel validates me in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But because they will say things and I'll be like, oh my god, I think that way too. And sometimes if I'm in an environment where it's like, oh, I didn't think it was going to, necessarily like, if my day isn't going a certain way and I listen to Locatora Radio, I'm great. Or I listen to an old episode of Gigless, I'm great because I'm like, you know, the positivity that is there despite all the negative things that are going on,
Yeah, 100%. I think that's something I'm working on personally. I'm so addicted to Instagram. I'll just say that. And like that is the first thing I check every morning. But I think it also, and I think it's so important to take breaks. I think it's important to distance yourself away, especially for BIPOC creators. I mean, right now the world's so heavy for folks like Black and Brown folks right now, and it's once again, I'm not going to name any events, but it is important to like take a step back and just kind of like reset. But I also
yeah,
think there's an importance of curating your creating your feed to creating your Instagram and your feed to be able to show content, like beat the algorithm, right? So like if all
right,
you're following, and I'm going to credit this to one of my another fellow attorney who's a content creator, my friend Sophia from the Traveling Sisterhood. She said to me in an episode of Rooftops that it's important to curate your content and what you're seeing, right? So like interact with content, like BIPOC content creators and like their work, interacting with um, social justice news or activists and things like that to ensure that your feeds like not just influencers and brands and hype beasts or whatever you want to call them. And if that makes you feel joy, go ahead and follow those folks, but also follow content that like fills your soul, that like what content that makes you happy. Don't stress yourself, looking at someone's brunch picture if that doesn't make you happy.
Like,
Content
I
you're
need a mimosa too, you
yeah, like
know?
or like following folks who may present this lifestyle, like someone who's in Dubai and wearing Gucci all the time. And if that
Yeah.
makes you happy, go ahead. But if that doesn't, constantly curate your content, like interact with content, search out for content that makes you feel whole, makes you feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And to all the artists and musicians that are listening to this that are dependent on people following stories or following daily posts or whatever, I will just say this, that my story following shot up when I went to Spain last November. My story following shot up, and everybody, when I was in Madrid, everybody was following me. I was getting like, close to 200 views a story or more, and on my personal Instagram. And then I was like, I was in Spain and I didn't, lie to anybody, but I made a post and I was like, listen, these are my friends. I'm staying with them. We are doing Airbnbs. And I was able to get this, I was able to get this trip so cheap because I'm going in the off season, and half of this, most of, like, I only paid $200 round trip because I used an app to help me get a discount. And then I saved up all this money from when I was working in college. And after being so blatantly honest with all those people, it dropped down to only like 60 people following my stories every day. When they found out that I wasn't like spending crazy money, like more than half the people dropped. I like, it was just so weird. But I had people message me like, yo, like, you made me feel so much better that like you're not overtly bragging or that you're trying to show off or anything. I was like, no, dude, I worked for this trip and it's within my budget and I'm gonna have a good time regardless, and I had an excellent time.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think like it's so interesting because I think social media is used as an escape, right? So people see things like these trips or these like luxurious places. Honestly, like I've never really been out the country except to go to Thailand, which is just going home for me. And seeing those trips, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I can go. And it provides an escape. But I think, like you said, right, using social media in a way that's intentional, right? Using social media is consuming content intentionally, ensuring that you're able to, you know, like do things that make you happy. Not now happy doesn't mean like do things that make you like completely ignorant, like just like not be aware of the world, but like consume content that makes you happy and consume content that's going to make you critically reflect on yourself and make you better as a person. And like I
Right.
know for me, like I follow pages, mostly from like, I've now tried to incorporate activists, like more like BIPOC activists, right? Especially folks who don't have the same identities as me, like queer folks or folks who have mobility issues, folks who are like in bigger bodies than me. So it's like to ensure that I'm getting content and learning more about that and like reflecting on my own privilege and like seeing them and seeing more voices. And so anyway, that's just a long way of kind of me saying that social media and content creation and consumption can be used for good and for like positive things and like like work that you're doing with gig like work that I'm doing with rooftop conversations, like you're able to do good things and like be positive in a world if you're being intentional about it.
Yeah, I totally understand. It's just and I feel that there's a responsibility that falls on both the follower and the content creator. And if you don't like what you're seeing, just leave. If you walk into a party and they're only serving chocolate cake and you love strawberry cake or red velvet, you can leave.
Yeah, no,
Um,
definitely. Yeah, and I even say that with like people in like things in like rooftop conversations or even my personal Instagram, right? If you don't like what I'm posting, there's a mute button. I've muted so many people for my own mental health. You know what I mean? There's an unfollow
yeah.
button. I won't feel hurt, if my content isn't serving you anymore on both my personal and my rooftop conversations thing. Feel free to leave, and that's what that you can always just unfollow someone. That button's amazing. If you don't want to unfollow, you can. There's a mute button, and that's also great too.
Yeah, so we're winding down to the end of our excellent interview. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to say to anyone who's listening to this episode?
Yeah, I think if you're looking to create something, just do it, especially during this time. Like, especially during this time in COVID, there's so many possibilities that you can do and film. And if you were always like waiting to do it, this is the time to do it. And like as my coworker said, and I'm like gonna credit her again, just it's all about just creating it, or just get to work and creating it. Don't think about being perfect, don't think about monetizing, don't think about popularity. If you love it, if you can stand behind it, if you're so passionate about it, and if you're not passionate about it, just put pen to paper and just do it, and the idea will come from there. I literally got the idea from Rooftop Conversations while boxing upstairs in my gym clothes, and that's how that came about. So just
Yeah.
do it and just keep going.
Yeah, May will definitely knock someone TF out because ooh boy, post COVID, she was in the gym at 5 a.m. She went rumbling, and it was like, it was
It
excellent.
definitely right. Like my old life was like workout, workout, workout. It was I miss it, but I mean things happen and you just have to adapt.
I think we've all had to adapt.
I
But
know.
yes, thank you so much for coming on this episode of Gigless. And I will tell people where they can find Rooftop Conversations on Instagram, and also if you want us to post your personal, we're going to
Yeah.
have all the links to May's work in the show notes. And yeah,
I've had so much fun talking to you, and I of course like thank you so much for giving me this platform to talk about my work and things like that. Gigless is
always,
amazing. Bye.
always, always. Well, yeah. So this was a great episode of Gigless. And again, for season 2, if you're listening and you know someone who is a creative person who is experiencing, what it's like post quarantine pandemic and they want to talk about it, our door is open. So yeah. All right. Dane, take us out.
Thank you for listening to the Gigless podcast, hosted by Remi Leibovic and by Dane Wagner. The song used in our intro and outro is Beach Walk by Unicorn Heads. If you enjoyed this podcast, head over to our social media pages on Instagram at Gigless Podcast and our website, giglesspodcastblog.wordpress.com. There, you can find out more about the artist, contact the host and producer, and find out more about our schedule. Thank you.